Happy to be back in your household, and we always appreciate your watching our broadcast. And yes, I'm Armstrong Williams, and welcome back to another edition. Robert Traum and Marcia Dyson is in the house today. I think I just butchered Robert's name, but it's okay. I usually get it right. Robert, what's happening, brother?
Hey, Armstrong, how are you?
I know I butchered it. Oh, there's CJ with that hat on. Look at CJ. She's showing out today, isn't she? Oh, well, it must be horse season. Is it horse?
Kentucky Derby is this weekend, right?
Don't say that.
Absolutely.
What?
Don't say that because we might be outdated. Come on now. Let's keep this dated. Okay, now, back to the business. Okay, so listen, I have to tell you this, okay? I remember when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. I was traumatized by it. As a man, as a brother, I was traumatized by that. But when I saw this jerk go up on stage and try to attack Dave Chappelle, they handled their business.
Yeah,
Let me tell you, they took care of their business up in that house, okay? Nobody applauded. Nobody gave him a standing ovation. They took his butt out, and that's what happens when you go and try to assault people on stage after Will Smith gave you permission. That you don't know what the line is anymore.
That's
now, Robert, I got to tell you something. I felt good about it, but you can take me on. It made me happy.
Well, look, I agree with you, and I think that we have to make sure that we are protecting individuals in their place of work. Let's understand that Chris Rock was at work. He was hired to tell jokes. Dave Chappelle was hosting an event, telling jokes. He was at work. We have to look at the security at these venues because, as was seen, this young, disturbed man had a knife on him when he attacked Dave Chappelle. And when he went in to tackle him, let's imagine if he had had his knife out instead and had stabbed him right there. It could have been a fatal event. So we have to make sure that Americans start to respect other Americans and understand that your 15 minutes of fame trying to get on stage with somebody should not be worth someone else's life. We've gotten to a point of just a caustic society where these things are now accepted. We have to restore that beloved community where we're not attacking each other in the streets and understand that there has to be consequences to repercussions for actions of the nature.
It's so encouraging, Marcia, to hear Hillard Patillo. I mean, because it's reasonable.
It is reasonable. Like you said, the man was at work. David Chappelle was at work. Chris Rock was at work. And even when you see this sort of craziness on airplanes, the stewardesses are at work, right?
Yes, it's
and
true.
I remember there was a flight, and the airline stewardess had to cock a passenger with a coffee cup. You know, the people are not having it, and they're, you know, but it's a lack of civility. And we can say that it has a lot to do with mental illness, and it does, but it lets you know, like, how many crazy people are there out there, right? I don't like to use the word crazy, but people who cannot control themselves.
How many are pretending to be crazy?
And pretending to be crazy, because right now that seems to be the past. You know, everybody want to, like, plead, you know, temporary insanity and things like that, but some people just want to do it for 15 seconds or 15 minutes of fame, too.
You know, CJ, I was reading this article in Essence magazine, and they talked about the depression and suicide among black teens are at an alarming high. You don't hear much about that. CJ, what do you think the issue is? Why is there so much depression and suicide?
Well, I think several different things. We've always had some mental health issues in the black community. And depression, we just never did talk about it openly and freely. And now as we are moving forward into what I call this clickbait society, it is exacerbated between COVID, some hardships, and the lack of social and communication skills. Because we have a generation that is, you know, communicate via electronics.
So you know, I'm going to tell you something that when you speak of this, you know, I know we heard a few weeks ago that Kevin Samuels, the talk jock, talks about relationships, passed away, Hillard Patillo. And, you know, I find it amazing to me when you don't like someone's view or don't like what they represent. When they die, you think God is acting on your behalf because he disrespected you. And all of a sudden, you get a thrill out of this person who's died. That's his profession. It's entertainment. I don't care what people say. People have no words, have no power over me, unless it's people who know me and have real meaning in my life. He has a right to say whatever, but he died, and yet women feel as though he was a misogynist. What does it say about our society? This is the thing that what's happening with free speech when people express themselves. It goes back to Will Smith. It goes back to David Chappelle.
Absolutely.
People just don't know how to handle public figures and how they criticize and how they conduct their business, Marcia.
Well, for women, and even as African Americans, we talk about the strong woman. We talk about we came from strength, and then all of a sudden we become these things, individuals that just melt at any certain things. We know that sticks and stones, what happened to that, can break our bones, you know, and words can never hurt me. If words were offensive to anybody, that means, you know how many people would be dead now? I mean, I may have offended someone and not even known it, or sometimes intentionally, right? If you're in having a verbal fisticuff, so to speak. But this whole annihilation and cancellation of one's individual person because they said something that you thought was offensive is very weak, and it shows something about our character, or more importantly, our lack of character and our fortitude anymore. But, you know, when you talk about Kevin Samuels, right, the women wanted to go after him because he said after 35, you're basically dead.
No, he said you're leftover. You're
leftover, which means you're basically dead.
Well, you can say that about men, too.
Right, but who cares about that? Because what he don't understand, the women who are over 35, and I know a lot of them, I mentor a lot of them, they took a long time for their education. They wanted to settle their career. They wanted different things in life that my mother may not have thought of, and they don't see themselves as over. So for him to say it, and for women who to really absorb it and to ingrain it, then you got the problem, sister, not him. Because only the woman who would have let herself be subscribed that way would be offended by it, because most of the young women that I mentor, like, he's a fool, but he can say what he want to say because he's not talking about me.
You know, Robert, why has society become so oversensitized all of a sudden? I mean, back during the day with my father and mother, they were so busy trying to get the cotton out of the field, get the tobacco out of the field, take care of the swine. None of these issues were never even in our dinner table, Marcia. We never even had these issues.
Well, they got the mic. You know, there's a time when we didn't have the mic. We couldn't talk about stuff. Now it's amplified. Everybody got the mic, right? Everybody want to be seen. I think it started with the pre-reality shows, with the Jerry Springer shows. You had some of the most ludicrous, crazy stories told that you would never tell in public, but people who have this isolation, people may have these pains, they want to tell about it, even though we think it's kind of not savvy or whatever. So that everybody now has a mic, everybody has, it's free speech, right? So you want to do it. You may not be sophisticated, you may not be savvy, you may not be cultured, but I got the mic, I have something to say, and I'm going to say it. So all I let the words do is just, you know, like float on by, and not let them resonate with me or to impact me on any level of my being, because I don't have to take it, but even though we have to hear it.
And Robert, you got Black China trying to sue the Kardashians to get millions of dollars because her feelings hurt and she lost her way of life. You got Johnny Depp suing Amber Heard for $50 million. I mean, what is it? Is it about money?
And Ray J.
Wait, let me get somebody else in on this conversation. Well, go ahead, Robert.
Armstrong, I think this is what happens when technology progresses faster than society can evolve. As you were saying, 100 years ago, we barely had electricity in most people's houses in the 1920s. We still were largely agrarian economy. Fast forward 100 years now, we literally have the ability to go on our phones and access the entire history of humanity. We have instant communication around the world. You can live stream what's going on the space station. You can read what was in the Library of Alexandria. You can find out the entire knowledge of the University of Timbuktu. And what do we use it for? We use it to spread memes, show videos, and talk about other people. Our society is not prepared for the level of technology that we currently have. And because of this, the conversations which used to happen in the barbershop, which used to happen around the kitchen table, now they are for international and worldwide consumption. So everybody gets to have an opinion now, regardless of knowledge. You used to actually have to know what you were talking about for people to take you seriously or to pay any attention to your opinions on issues. Now they'll have, I was watching a climate change debate a couple weeks ago. They had an international climate scientist who had a PhD and multiple research papers on climate change arguing with somebody off YouTube. This is the place that we are at in this world right now, and we have to start bringing back some kind of balance, because right now the technology is so far outstripped the society that we are seeing the growing pains associated with that.
You know, CJ, does it mean that lives are empty? Because what people do is spend their time talking about others, jealous of others, envious of others, in others' business, and yet, what about their business? What are they doing to move the world forward? What are they doing to move their children forward? What are they doing to make their communities better? Is this what social media and media has reduced us to now?
media has reduced us, particularly social media, has reduced us to a clickbait society. We, like the other panelist said, we always want our 15 minutes of fame. And that came through the Kardashians. But it started before that, because even if you think about going back when hip hop came on scene, and I think it was crisscross, and what they brought into the mainstream was wholesome prison wear with their pants down sagging. And now it is a standard, a custom for everybody to wear their pants baggy. It is standard, a custom that, okay, if you go out and get shot and you have your ankle bracelet on, that's a sign of being masculine now. And we need to have a see Dolores Tucker moment in the Black community.
It is true. When did you ever think, I know I got an ankle bracelet because you are being monitored by the prison system would be cool?
I think that's a lot too of the culture, a lot of the hip hop culture. You know, this is after like KRS-One, some of those who were literates, which we don't have lyricism at all in the kind of hip hop that we have. And when again it becomes a group of people, mostly African American young men especially, who have no connection to anything. They're not in the Boys and Girls Club. They don't, the churches are not looking after them. They don't have the after school programs. And whether you come from a single parent or double headed household, there's still something about having recognition. Everybody wants to be recognized. Everybody wants to be a star.
Even if you mean you have to kill somebody to get recognized.
In the gang culture,
yes,
the initiation is to kill or to, you know, gang rape a woman, right, for notoriety and to get up the rung of the letter. So this whole thing that we want to be seen, and I don't know if this in our cellular DNA as African Americans of being these obscured people that we want to be seen some kind of way, but sometimes I'm alarmed.
You know, it's just not bad. It's all of them.
Well, right.
Americans, African Americans don't have no monopoly on this.
No,
all these kids.
Yeah, all the kids.
No,
I'm not saying all of us.
I need a break. Oh, come on. I need a break. All of them. We'll be back. Don't go away. Come on now. Robert Patillo, abortion battles are moving to the states. What do you forecast in the future?
Well, I think a couple of things we have to look at. One, we have to look at this Supreme Court leak, because I think the institutional legitimacy of the court is at stake if we start having this happening on a regular basis. Right now, it's in the abortion context, so certain people are celebrating. Let's say it's in the national security context next time, or if it's in other constitutional rights. Then also, I think we have to look at the issue of stare decisis. What exact weight will the court give to other court opinions in the future? How can we base our legal system off of Supreme Court decisions if they're going to be arbitrary and capricious? It just depends on who the president is, who dies on the court, and that's going to determine what U.S. law is. And then also, I think we're going to see a battle take place if this does indeed happen before the November elections. This could put that red wave in jeopardy. In states like Georgia, where you have Warnock running for Senate and where you have Stacey Abrams running for governor, you have thousands and millions of angry women turning out to the polls, ready to make a change to repeal the state's heartbeat bill. And if you replicate that across the country, you could wipe out all the progress the Republicans thought they were going to make going into this fall election. So what I do think we have to do is spend less time trying to figure out if abortion is going to be legal or not, and spend more time making it obsolete. We have to provide services that promote the concept of life. Mothers should not have to decide whether or not I can afford to feed this child or this child needs to die prenatally. We have to become that beloved and loving society that's willing to take care of ours, because we, at the end of the day, we have to have population growth in this country. So if we're not investing in our young people, investing in our youth, investing in life not just before they're born, but until they are adults, then we can't survive as a nation. So this is a larger cultural conversation that has to take place, that right now is only being led by the extremes of both sides, instead of trying to find a central point where we can come together.
Now, CJ, you know, I've got mad respect for Robert, okay? Now, I got his little hint about thousands of people going to the polls to change from blue or red to blue, whatever. But let me just say this to you. In the most recent elections, former President Donald Trump had 22 endorsed candidates on the ballot. They all won. And it won in the middle of the leak at the Supreme Court, protesting about abortion. I will say this, and I know you will correct me and anybody else on the panel. When people are going to the polls, whether it was a week ago or whether it's in November, abortion is not their priority, okay? It's the pocketbook issues, fuel,
Right.
supply chain, their way of life. Now, if all things were equal, that may be the case, but I'm telling you now, it was shown in the recent election what people are. And it's not just Republicans. It's Democrats and independents who are dissatisfied with Joe Biden and his policies.
You're absolutely correct. Now, will the abortion issue, get a few extra people out to the polls? Maybe. But when you have black and white mothers complaining of the fact that they can't get Similac, the shelves are bare and they can't feed their newborn babies, and we've made breastfeeding not necessarily the thing of the norm, and you still also have mothers who can't breastfeed because of medical issues, it's a problem. And that's what's going to drive folks out to the polls. When you now have gas prices astronomical, it is April and we've had heat and sun at 90 degrees. It's almost 79 degrees here in parts of Virginia. Unheard of at this time of the year. Electric bills are up, gas bills are up, gas prices are up, food is up, and then you have seniors that are rationing their food because of medicine, because the cost of medicine, manufacturing is up. So everything, and this was before the invasion in February dealing with Ukraine and Russia. So this total economy is owned by the Biden administration, whether they want to deflect or whatever. They can't run from it. They can't hide from it. And it's going to be the test at the ballot box come November.
Marcia, diesel fuels this economy.
Right.
Diesel price in Pennsylvania right now is over $6 a gallon. It is the trucks that are on the highways that provide the food to the shelf. It is the Amtrak, the trains, the cargo that is run by diesel. It is diesel that fuels these homes. When you sit in your luxury home and you got that wonderful air conditioner running, that's diesel. When those prices are surge, your utilities surge. That hits people where they are.
Yeah, CJ said it right, and President Clinton's always said it better. It is the economy, stupid. To say that a lot of women are up in upheaval about the abortion rights, maybe a million are. But during the Million Women's March, it was a million women. You know how many millions of women there are in America? And it was really that Hillary didn't win March. And even within that, it didn't allow Democrat women who didn't think like the majority of them did, it didn't include them. But when it comes to the voting, it will be those single mothers or the caretakers of the aged. We act as if the aged people, the elders don't exist, or poverty doesn't exist in America. I went to the pump last week when I'm here in the district, and when I looked at the price of the gas per gallon, I said, I paid $2 less this year. How in the world are people who are below the poverty line making it? How are they getting to work? Even if they choose to go on the bus system, how much more time are they away from their family and their way of life? So it is about the economy. And so I think that when they go in the booth, they're going to vote based upon their wallet, not whether or not a woman will have an abortion or not, because I do know that women, if you're going to have an abortion, they're going to have that abortion with or without Planned Parenthood and with or without the Supreme Court. And I think that talking about the sort of ancient people talk about the hangers, that's long going forward. Women it's more sophisticated. There are doctors that would do that for you across state lines, and we don't have enough money. If we don't have enough money to feed the poor, educate our children, we don't have that many doctors or people who are going to stand outside and see where a woman goes and follow to see what she chooses with her body to do. And it really is a woman's choice. But collectively, in my mindset, I'm going to leave it to the Supreme Court and whatever the fallout is there. But my concern is about the economy. And we don't talk about the food depositories, too. So not only are food prices high, there's a shortage of food in certain communities. And I live in some of the most affluent communities here in D.C. and then in Nashville. And when I go to the grocery store, it's like I feel like I'm in Cuba looking for rations in some of the stores. So I think that's going to be a major concern.
Robert, how do you think the continued conflict in Ukraine is going to play out in the upcoming midterm elections?
Well, I think it's going to be it's going to depend on the exact amount of progress that's being made, particularly by Putin. What's expected right now is that on May 9th, Russian Victory Day, where they celebrate victory over the Nazis, that President Putin will declare formal war on Ukraine. Currently, he's been in for the last 2 months what's called a special military operation. So, for the people who have been celebrating the brave Ukrainian people fighting back, that's because the Russians have not sent their full force at them. Look at what happened in Chechnya in 1999. Look at what happened in the Republic of Georgia in 2008. You saw Russia has the largest fleet of artillery in the entire world. They level cities and raze them to the ground. We've not seen the Tu-95 bomber fleets carpet bombing cities, for example. We've seen only 2 uses of the hypersonic missiles that Russia has been developing over the past decade. All the Ukrainian tanks that we've seen blown up have been older T-72 tanks and T-90 tanks from the Soviet era. The Russians have even rolled out the T-14 tanks, for example. So I think the war is going to get worse for the Ukrainians before it gets better. And since America's now fighting a proxy war in the Ukraine, similar to what we saw in Korea and Vietnam, very much American prestige is on the line. So if the Ukrainians are able to beat the Russians back and come to a peace treaty without having to give up Mariupol, without having to give up Odessa, perhaps pushing back the lines to the pre-2014 lines in Crimea, then that can be seen as a win for Biden, a win for NATO in the West. However, if you see Ukraine overrun and Zelensky having to sign a peace treaty which completely landlocks Ukraine and connects Russia directly to Moldova over the Black Sea and gives them control of the ports in the south, then that will very much be seen as a weakness for America and NATO in the West and a black eye for President Biden. So I think it's very much going to depend on what the outcome is of this war.
You know, CJ, it has been rumored from very good sources that there is legislation before Congress committing troops on the ground in Ukraine, and also a lot of our sources says that a lot of military, a lot of soldiers are being shipped to that region. You think Americans have the appetite for their men fighting and giving their blood on the soil of Ukraine?
Well, I think they do, because I think we are at a point where we're seeing daily where our men and, that greatest generation getting older and dying, and we're seeing a lot more of the Tuskegee Airmen getting older and dying. And I think we understand, those of us who are in their 40s that were baby boomers at that time, understand the importance of the European bloc and the fact that Russia wants to change that. And we're seeing where now North Korea and China are moving more and more aggressively and doing things, particularly trying to, rattle those sabers against Taiwan. So I think as we go forward, there will be war. And I think at the end of the day, we Americans must brace ourselves that we will have a open boots on the ground. We do have boots on the ground currently in Ukraine. Make no mistake about that. But openly, with the legislation that comes with committing those additional boots on the ground, America will have to understand that that's going to be done. But here's the other thing that nobody is talking about. When we look at the reversal of Title 42, when we look at the massive amounts of Ukrainians not going through the European embassies, but going over to Mexico and coming in, we must recognize 2 things. We have a black labor force that has not come back into the labor market. And when we're looking at the number of jobs, we're now seeing those recent replaced immigrants coming in. We're looking at Title 42 probably being moved or suspended. We're going to have a major crisis in our urban centers that nobody's willing to talk about. And it's going to be greater hardship for Black and African Americans in those communities.
Before I say goodbye to CJ and Robert, Marcia is going to continue with me as we celebrate this Memorial Day weekend with men who have been on the front lines of this conflict. But I want to raise this with you, Robert. The president has again made history when he named Catherine Jean-Pierre as his new press secretary. She's Haitian. She certainly has a strong resume. She was Kamala Harris' chief of staff when she ran for the Democratic nomination. And she's no stranger. She's also was the outgoing press secretary's deputy. Your thoughts on this appointment?
I think it's a historic appointment. As a Haitian American, it's outstanding to see a sister being put into that position. I also think she's the first openly LGBTQ press secretary that we've had in United States history, first African American woman to be press secretary. But I think what's most important, and what will be most important, is whether or not she will be empowered to actually make any sorts of decisions or be able to influence the White House. Think about what we saw last year at the border with Haitian Americans being rounded up on horseback. You have the highest ranking Caribbean American woman in Kamala Harris as the borders are, and that's still what is happening to black and brown people at the border. So Karine Jean-Pierre, although it's a historic moment, we want to make sure that she's empowered to actually do something with that position, and not simply, as Jen Psaki and other press secretaries, just kind of be the mouthpiece and shining up what happens with the administration. We want to see her actually have some kind of power to do things.
When we return, John Haines and Scott Hagans will join us as we salute our military force on this Memorial Day weekend. Thank you both, CJ and Rob, and also thank you for coming on at such short notice. We had a slight change that happens in this business, but much respect and appreciation. Marcia and I will be back after these messages. John Haines is a veteran with the United States Marine Corps, and Scott Hagans is a grassroots engagement director for Concerned Veterans for America in North Carolina and a veteran of the United States Army. And we welcome you both to the broadcast on this Memorial Day weekend. Thank you both for joining us. Do we celebrate Memorial Day? Do we celebrate the occasions as we remember the men and women who fought and died and continue to protect us all around the world, to really show their brute sacrifice and continued dedication and legacy to this great experiment, Scott?
Thank you for having me on. I believe so. Here in the Fort Bragg, North Carolina area, we celebrate Memorial Day with parades. We usually have flags out. In the military community, Memorial Day is very important, especially after Afghanistan and Iraq. It means a lot to us.
But do you think America, especially the younger generations, romanticized by the movies that they watch, and instead of knowing what it's really like to make that kind of sacrifice? Because you don't see them signing up in great numbers as volunteers to the branches of military service.
Right. Well, Memorial Day is special to us veterans because, well, we know the sacrifice. We have friends that made the ultimate sacrifice. We go visit the graveside. But for the general as a whole, it is a little bit of a different story. The veterans community is a special community and it's a special culture, a little different from America as a whole.
So, John, how is our veteran culture? How are our soldiers, past and present, and our nurses? And does our government continue to take care of them and show our gratitude?
No, I would definitely say they do. I mean, they go to great lengths to really provide excellent service to our veterans. I used to work at the Marine Corps. I recently transitioned over to the Department Defense Health Agency, excuse me. And that primary mission is to care for wounded veterans. So I resonate with that mission, and I know veterans are very important to them. I hear about it all the time.
You know, we've seen many conflicts that have caused the lives of many veterans, changed their families forever, and now we see what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, and we remind that there's a possibility that we could find ourselves in another world conflict. I mean, if you study the way wars and conflicts have happened in the past, it just makes no sense. It shouldn't have happened. If someone had said this, if this had been negotiated, it wouldn't have happened. But we've seen through history what is possible. Does it give you concern? Does it make you pause? And how does it make you feel, given your past service to this country? Still with you, John.
Personally, I feel that it's a trying time. I'm a combat vet. I went to, I was on the cross the line of departure for shock and awe. So I know the real world experience that this is actually discussing. And it's it's hard to explain. It's very surreal. It doesn't resonate within daily life, so it's like segmented apart from the person. You know, I'm sorry. That's a very charged subject for me. I get a little passionate about it still to this day. But you know, I apologize. Thank you.
No. We understand. It's okay, my man. I mean, that's understanding. I want people to understand your emotions, because I don't think people always get that, Marcia. You know, we talk about it from a distance. I mean, this was your life. You lived it. You've been a part of it. And you know what it means if someone has to go back, because you've been in those shoes. And you know, it can be a nightmare. It can be brutal. You lose people that you love. You have people that have been injured for the rest of their life, and they come back, and they're not the same. And some of them are homeless. We look at homeless people out on the streets in these different cities across the country. A lot of these veterans who've lost their way because the conflict has so overwhelmed them for fighting, they just cannot return to normalcy. So we understand. Yes. So please continue.
I think it's important. I mean, the part about it being separate from the everyday life means that it's hard to adjust. When you get back from a conflict zone, there's nothing to relate to. For you, life was on pause. For the rest of the world and for your loved ones, life has moved on. They've had commonality experiences that you didn't get. Like, I wasn't in country for September 11th, and that has resonated across the United States in a way that it's hard to explain to somebody who wasn't who was not outside of the country. I was with the 15th MEU. I did squares out in the ocean for about 4 months. Then we went into Pakistan to help forward projection for our armed forces. So it's hard to adjust when you get back, because it's hard to find people to relate. And people like me and myself and others who I assume had way worse time than I did, it's difficult to talk about. So it's hard to find a safe place, really, in short.
Marcia, you guys.
I have great empathy for our veterans and even our active military, because one thing, I'm part of Coalition of Hope, and we're collectively an organization of active and retired military trying to get 2 Navy vessels approved by Congress for first disaster relief. But the one aspect that I wanted the vessel, which I told the founder, Timothy Hagan, was that, you know, this is also a way for the military personnel to absolve themselves of their military assignment, which often conflicts with their spiritual and personal moorings. Can you imagine a kid just going off, and I mean, to give your life, you know, you're putting your life on the front line to go and serve our country. You're seeing things. I don't care if you're a bad boy off the street or a young kid want to like leave college to come and protect our country, and you go and you see things. You have to do things that are so antithetical to who you are. You may have seen it on television and it's all romanticized, but there you are with that gun. There you are looking at maybe an innocent victim more so than even the enemy. You come back and you try to wrestle with that mentally. And so there is, you know, my concern about the post-traumatic stress, not because only for the military, but often there's some military personnel who become our police officers. And I'm a social justice activist, and you know, I kind of push back on that, defund the police, and you know, we tell them to be careful when there's a mental health issue crisis with someone who seems deranged, but also they have problems that they have not been able to address. One, because they don't talk about, well, we are talking about it not enough, but how do you really address it? So my thing is that they need to go through some serious care. And we got to find ways to really do that. And that is a major concern for the veterans. You know, we want to applaud LeBron James or Michael Jordan when he was sick, because he went on the basketball court with 106-degree temperature and he made that three throw, right? Or somebody's ice skating or hockey play. Or even boxers like Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson. How can they get in the ring knowing they're going to get whipped? And if we get that celebration and the money for them, why don't we see our military personnel the same thing? You are doing the biggest sport called militarism and putting your life on the line. And so I'm for the vets, I'm for the active, all branches of government, and we need to do a little bit more for them. And the homelessness, when you go into LA, it's a shame, you know, and to see them begging on the street corners while we go to Ukraine, right? And the Speaker of the House can stand up the stairs and take a picture with Zelensky, and I'm saying, but what about these people who have fought for our country themselves, who are now in a kind of a crisis a world crisis as far as I'm concerned, having served our country and not getting the necessary attention. I'm glad that hospital is better, but what about the lifestyles of these people who are below the poverty line and living on the streets, who have served and protect this country, so that we can sit here and talk and do what we're doing now and debate speech or abortion or whatever the case may be. And even Ukraine, you know, there's a cost that they're paying, and they should be paid in every aspect of their lives.
Scott, how do we do more to show that appreciation? And you know, John has made it clear, and he speaks for so many, that you never really adjust, because you leave one world and you come back to a different world because you're not the same person. What more can we do? And I know it's not everything about money. Sometimes it's about programming, but it's also understanding what the need is.
Right. Understanding is a good concept. So just for like a personal experience, when Kabul fell, I was home. I'm out here at Fort Bragg, and there's a huge Special Forces community. And I have a buddy down the street that came down and sat on my couch. He came from Afghanistan 2 months prior. And he just cried. The big dude just sitting there on your couch crying uncontrollably. And you wonder, what's the point of the war? And that's kind of the effects. Well, we could do more. You know, for me personally, I'm active in VA healthcare reform. We have several VA hospitals here in North Carolina. We have Fort Bragg and Camp Lejeune, huge Marine and Army duty stations, lots of veterans. And they're turning vets away. Vets that have alcohol and drug addiction directly related to these wars, they're turning them away. They don't have room for them. When Trump passed the Mission Act to reform it, you're supposed to have an appointment outside the VA if they cannot meet you within 21 or 28 days. The VA is not meeting those standards. Once Biden got elected, they just kind of said, oh, well. And right now it's 60 to 70 days to get seen by specialty care, wow. Which is totally unacceptable. So sometimes, you know, we're throwing money in Ukraine when, you know, my neighbor down the road who was combat arms as well overdosed just 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. You know, he's no longer with us. And so, you know, that's what we're feeling in the veterans community. And a lot of us perish in silence. You know, whether it's suicide or drug addiction, we're suffering in silence. It's hard to reach out for help. And sometimes, you know, besides just policy stance or money, sometimes just listening, calling, checking in. You know, Memorial Day is hard. Veterans Day was hard for me this past year. And I'll say, you know, sometimes on those holidays, check in on your guys. If you have a veteran, whether they deployed or not, just check in on them. That'd be my best advice.
You know, I'm going to take a quick break and come back because, John, I do want you to share with us what has worked for you, because you expressed the disconnect, and so you can build the pathway for others to come so that we can do better with our programming, with how we reach out to help you adjust. I want to delve into that much more on this Memorial Day weekend. I'm Armstrong Williams. We'll be back. So, John, you're on the spotlight again.
Great.
So how do we do better? What's missing? What would have helped better? What would have been in place would have better helped you adjust to coming out of those circumstances? And what is it that you can adjust for coming out of those circumstances?
That's a very good question. One of the things that I personally had a problem with is in the Marine Corps, in military training in general, they really reinforce the personal strengths. They give these people all these tools, and they empower them. They show them how to walk around in this very particular world. And that very same strength and that network that you relied upon for all those years for many aspects of your life, all of a sudden they get an end parent on it, and then you're left with no real social structure per se. You have veterans communities that do try to aggressively reach out, and I think we do a really good job. There's some really caring people there. But for me personally, I had to accept the fact that all that strength that was given to me by the Marine Corps and all that resiliency and the performance that I had been able to achieve in my life and things that I'd done to that point kind of became a hindrance to me in my day-to-day life, because I couldn't interact with the same people the same ways. I couldn't interact with my family the same ways. I didn't understand the social norms of what was expected of me. So it was just that transitory phase, that immediate transitory phase was very dangerous, because you think that you're strong, but the strength you're trying to rely upon is actually your weakness. It's almost self-defeating. I don't really know how to address that.
What is it, if you were the general and you had the new class of recruits coming in, if you could tell them what they would need to prepare for the military and the conflict in the theater today, what advice would you share? I
mean, in conflict, in theater, you have to behave certain ways to get certain reactions, to get certain outcomes. It's an outcome-specific relationship, so actions to specific outcomes. So, I mean, in order to go do those particular tasks, you can't really be grounded as an ethical human, as was previously stated. I mean, these behaviors that we're told, good job for, we have to do them in uniform because these are not acceptable behaviors to do in a common place, which is why they all occur in uniform. So I don't really know how to answer that question.
I get what you're saying, and I think the audience gets it too. Let me come back to you, Scott. There's a different ethos, a different ethic, and a different moral structure in the military than when you come back home. And maybe you should talk about it, because I think that's important. In all the conversations I've had on this topic, I've never heard this before. So speak to that.
Well, I can only speak, I guess, from personal experience. The only thing I could say that in my darkest days in the military, when I was broke down the most, I kind of like what he said. They give you the strength. You have like these leadership tools, valor, honor, and I think the biggest tool for me that saved my life was humility. And that aspect of when you become a civilian, the military becomes a chapter of your life. And personally, get on your knees and pray. And I know that might sound really broad and specific, but that's what got me through. And I can only speak to myself.
Marcia, what are you hearing here?
I'm really hearing men in pain, honestly, and looking for an end of a rainbow. But they didn't weather the storm to end up being in the position that they are. And they really are calling out for help and more support. And let us understand the complexity of their lives, as a civilian, in listening to an armed branch of our military, and then coming back changed, that they are changed individuals. They're not that boy or girl or the young man or woman who set off, to go and do these kind of assignments and have these assignments, surprising them, because they don't really know what, it might be glamorous to say, I'm going to Korea, right? I'm going to the Middle East, and then you get there, and a lot of them are informed. We talked about how, culture informs certain people, because you look at these war movies, right, and you see the heroism of it, but people look at them like a cartoon, the way we've been socialized, that these people, are these men and women are not actors, and they're not going to get back up off the ground with their guts spilling out, right? They're not going to come back the same and be like a road runner, who gets this boulder thrown on his head from a Bugs Bunny, and it really will change you, and I see that, and that's the reason why I said that we really should, as American citizens, when we see the homeless vets or see them on the corner, that we really should support them, not only that way from out of our own pockets, but make sure that our government is taking care of these individuals who have enlisted their lives to protect the nation, right? We see it in the ownership of sports leagues, as I referred to that analogy earlier. So those owners protect those players in all forms and fashion, even get into their personal lives. If there's domestic violence, whatever the case, and we need to being in that kind of ways for these military men and women. I think they're supreme Americans in my estimation.
John and Scott, I've got to tell you, I think what I sense, I see both of you as being strong and courageous. Sometimes when you speak the truth about what you face and the instability and you come back to a different world, someone wants you to think that you're weak and you're complaining. No, that's just the reality. And the only way that you can get the truth of helping others overcome is that you have to have these stories. But I don't particularly think that the military encourages this. I think the military would want you to go with a certain persona that meets that valor and all that other stuff that you were talking about. But at the end of the day, Brian, I mean, listen, John, what you're saying to us, I'm human. John?
No, I think you're on point. I think there's a little bit of a conflict in between the two orientations of that individual's same existence. So you can be a soldier, any branch of service, and you could be a good citizen and go do all good citizen stuff, but a good citizen does not make a good soldier, and a good soldier does not make a good citizen. So I don't know, I do hear what you're saying, but there is a little bit of a dichotomy that these people have to walk around in and adjust to. I think military people are very talented and very exceptionally intelligent because they have to walk these two lines on a daily basis, and then they have to rationalize it for the rest of their lives.
Scott, how do we keep the memory of our falling alive in today's very complicated soundbite world that we find ourselves living in? You have this fast-paced world where the attention span is short, non-existent. How do we change that, if we can?
That's a good question. As someone with a limited attention span himself, I'm not really sure how to answer that. All I can say is, put out the American flag, service work. I feel like service work is a big deal. You can join an auxiliary group like VFW, American Legion. You can be part of an auxiliary group. Get embedded maybe a little bit with your veterans community. We usually pass out food on Thanksgiving Day. Concerned Veterans for America does a lot of service work, and there's a lot of organizations, a lot of VSOs out there. And I think Mother Teresa said, service work, the hands of service grow the heart. And, in an era where we're all about ourselves and we're very selfish, we don't really hear that, work of charity actually makes us whole. And if you want to give back to the veterans group, just, go feed them on a Thanksgiving dinner. Go feed them a Christmas dinner. Go take gifts to their kids on Christmas. There's a lot of organizations out there, and they need help and they need support.
John, when you think about Memorial Day weekend, what are the things that are more meaningful to you and more touching than anything else in terms of how we celebrate it and remember it?
Actually, this is something I've been trying to come to terms with over the last couple of years, is how I feel about Memorial Day. And, I've come to a place where I find that it's honorable. I feel that Memorial Day is honoring the veterans and, and at least understanding and accepting of the mission that they do. I personally find the unsolicited outpouring, even though many veterans find it a little tedious at times, but on Memorial Day I really appreciate it. I sincerely do. I appreciate the unsolicited support personally. And
Scott, you?
I agree. The unsolicited support, sometimes it's hard. People say thank you for your service. It actually naturally makes me uncomfortable because it's bittersweet, But like I said, sometimes the best service isn't saying thank you for your service. It's actually being of service yourself and helping out and getting to know a veteran and that sense of community. So, if they are depressed or suicidal or battling an addiction or something, they have someone to turn to.
So, John, do you encourage others to serve and the importance of it?
I mean, serving is important. But when people talk to me about serving, I always have to take it back to the person. I mean, because some people are born to serve. Some people, that's just all they've ever wanted to do. And other people, like you're saying, it's more of a grooming type of behavior. This is what it's seen in society. This is the movies. This is the expected behavior. So for some people, I think, yes, military service is absolutely probably needed for their core sense of self. But for others, I think it's more glamorized. And I think it's dangerous for those people because it's, you know, it's not a healthy environment. It's not a good job.
Well, listen, I
go home and feel good about yourself.
Well, I tell you what, I appreciate your candor and your transparency on this topic. Memorial Day weekend, we want to thank our earlier guests. We really want to thank John and Scott and all men and women for their service. Thank Marcia for joining us today, WJLA 24/7. And we wish you all a happy Memorial weekend, even though this is a very sobering, and I got to walk away from this conversation and really think about what our brothers said today. I'm Armstrong Williams.